So, on the topic of business law, business ethics, this is very interesting. I think it really deserves a little bit of introduction too. I imagine that just about everybody here came on some form of a visa, most of them associated with work. If you're not a tourist, then you have to demonstrate that you have some kind of a profession, something you can do in order to not end up on social services, because if you're white and you're from Europe, you can't come here for welfare and social security. The Torah as a whole has a pretty large number of mitzvot that pertain to money. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. We have in terms of the 10 Commandments, right? Lo tignov. So if you have such a concept as theft, that means you have such a concept as property law. No offense to Bernie Sanders. But if there is such a thing as private property and people who own it, you can't take it away from them. You can't expropriate their property without purchase or consent of some kind, or something being lost and abandoned. We have to have a system for things being lost and abandoned, so I can pick it up and keep it instead of having to give it to someone else. Generally speaking, because the Torah is not a list of random or arbitrary laws, but because it really is a lifestyle, you'll find that most of the mitzvot pertain to things that we do on a pretty regular basis. Okay? Almost a third of the mitzvot in the Torah pertain to food. You may or may not be aware of this. There are the species that we can and cannot eat. There's the interdictions that go along with them. We can't eat blood, we can't eat chered, we can't eat gidan hashem. We can't have the milk or the eggs or the meat of any non-kosher animal or bird or fish. We're not allowed to cook milk and meat. We're not allowed to, so lifeblood we already mentioned. The korbanot, there's a whole bunch of halachot that pertain to the korbanot, what the kohanim can and can't eat, under what terms and conditions, when and how. Agriculture, I can't eat from my food until I took the turma, the maaser sheni. We have lechet shichachan pe'ah, which effectively is agricultural rules that pertain to what I can and can't pick up, or what I have to leave for the poor people. The whole concept of turma, maaser, bikurim, the first fruits of the season, we take them to Beit HaMikdash. So there are a lot of restrictions, limitations that pertain to food. But because food is something so basic, something so necessary, it's not a surprise to us that if the purpose of the Torah is to help us live a lifestyle of more consciousness, of more awareness, to appreciate the origins of things, to appreciate what it is that we do, why we do it every moment of every day, some thought comes across your mind. You make a bracha before we eat, you make a bracha after we eat, you make a bracha after we go to the bathroom. Funny anecdote, last week there's a Jamaican guy, very nice guy. Most Jamaicans are probably nice people. He does some of the maintenance work for the landlord who owns the warehouse that I rent. So he came to the warehouse. If I have a non-kosher goat, usually he's the one who takes it. He loves goats, and he's perfectly fine with bad lungs. So he came in, the door was open, and I just come out of the bathroom, so I started making the Sharet Tzar. He didn't know who I was talking to. So he's standing there kind of polite, then he thought maybe I was praying, he takes off his hat, he puts his hat on his heart, like he was standing, out of respect and reverence. And he didn't understand why I was talking while he was trying to talk to me. So I said, no, it's okay, Sydney, just this prayer that we have. He's like, you pray in the bathroom? So I said, no, but we pray when we come out of the bathroom. We thank God, even when we're young, we thank God, for the ability to go. And he was shocked by this. To him, it was an amazing thing.
I don't think any other religion has such a thing.
I've never heard of such. We have Baal Pe'or that worshipped the whole concept of going to the bathroom. You have to leave it to Avodah Zarah. They were very creative. Yeah. Of all the things you could say about them, they were creative. They didn't leave one stone unturned in all the things they worshipped. If it was insects, like Baal Zevuv, Beelzebub is what they call this in English. Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
By Queen, Baal Zevuv, right. Yeah. So these were people who believed that insects represented some form of Kedusha.
And that's where it comes from.
Despicable form of Avodah Zarah, Beelzebub has a devil for us.
The Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, exactly. This is, you know how much Avodah Zarah we inspired? We own it. we have the copyright on all these things. Absolutely. I told you about the Wizard of Oz. This is all, come on. Sefer Yov. So, at any rate, there's a lot of interesting references there. But when it comes to Avodah Zarah, well, Isabel, I don't know, a very popular name in Europe. She was a tremendous Rasha. So, the Torah...
it was also a restaurant.
Huh?
It was also a restaurant.
How long did it last?
Yeah, a year.
A year? 2 years? I'm impressed. Because he was Belgian. So
With that name?
Jesuit.
Yeah, but they changed the name, no?
Yeah.
To get to do that, they changed
is
the
it still kosher now?
Well, they had
It doesn't exist
they had a
anymore.
Teuda before.
Yeah?
Yeah, but they wanted to go with more fancy Teuda, so they had the...
And now it's still open?
No, no.
It's closed now.
Allah
It is still-
Okay, so and I'm not the first one who's commenting on this. You'll notice there are quite a bit of sexual restrictions as well in the Torah. I mean, let's say mitzvot that pertain generally to what we call ishut, to relations between the genders, or in some cases even within the gender. As we just discussed at length, thanks to Stephen Goldberg. So you have first of all the mitzvah of procreation. Second of all, the interdiction of all kinds of incest, adultery, etc. Bestiality is on the list as well. Homosexuality, absolutely. The whole concept of tarat mishpacha, nida. Naturally, from this you have a zava, you have a yoledet. After a woman has a baby, also a man if he's a baal kiri or a zav. Also, there are sexual restrictions that apply to him. Days and times where it's forbidden for us to be together. Yom Kippur is one example of this. The Kohanim, how they can serve, etc. So, b'kitzur, there's a pretty long list in Achremot, Kedoshim. Some of it comes from also Bereshit of what we can and can't do. Then you have, of course, the Brit Milah, Avraham Avinu, a lot that comes out of that. And then there's the laws of marriage and how it pertains to the Ketubah and the Get. So, because this is something so basic and so fundamental, the real foundation of human life, there naturally is a lot of divinity associated with it. In other words, because the urge to procreate is so great, the reward is tremendous, and the punishments are pretty serious too. And if you look at most of the Yisurim that relate to food, the punishments are pretty bad as well. Karet for chelev, karet for eating blood, dam hanefesh anyway, karet for eating turma ma'aser if you're impure.
Blood means
It's
really?
the blood that comes out during the shechita. Think Dracula. Romanians, they're all like that. So, but they're good builders. So, effectively, Yeshiva, we had a bunch of them.
I know.
Anyway, it shouldn't surprise us. It's not like people look at the mitzvot sometimes and they say, you know what, this is really restrictive. There's so many halachot, so many details. But the reality is that these things that we engage in every day on a pretty much daily basis, they are tremendously important. This is the source of my parnasah business. And so naturally, what gives me at least physical life should be saturated with spiritual meaning as well. Most of these mitzvot are negative. When I say negative, I don't mean bad. I mean negative, like don't do this. So it's also pretty interesting. The Torah doesn't tell you to eat when you're hungry, for example. That's up to you. You figure this out. Or if you're European, you don't eat. It's okay. Be skinny. That's the fashion for whatever bizarre reason.
Shit.
Right. No, well, the Americans did. We didn't get that mitzvah. There aren't that many mitzvot in terms of business transactions that are positive. In other words, it's up to you to bring some creativity to how you make a living.
Well, you have to make work. You have to work for 6 days.
That's not so clear as a mitzvah midoraita to do that. That's a machloket amongst the Rishonim. The Rambam talks about this, and he says he holds that it's part of the mitzvah of Shabbat that you have a non-Shabbat routine during the week. To the extent that he says that if someone is dirt poor, the guy has nothing, no money, he should try to start a fire somewhere or write 2 letters during the week. So 6 days you work. So 6 yemim ta'avod, there's an emphasis of Gemara. It's machlokes the Gemara. Do we hold that it's a reshut? If you want to work, you can. You can work as much as you want or as little as you want. On Shabbat, you have to not work. So do we necessarily have a proactive, positive mitzvah, get up and work during the week? Or is it just keep Shabbat? And if you want, keep Shabbat during the week, for all we care. I don't burn fires, I don't kill animals, I don't write things, I don't sign things. So that in and of itself is a discussion. The limitations in terms of what you can do for a living are going to be those things that appear explicitly in the Torah, what you can and can't do. And in terms of money, it would be basically, obviously, repay what you borrowed. So, Mechila to Greece, but soon Italy, France, Portugal, Spain, Belgium,
America.
Ireland, England, and eventually America too. Just a question of time.
Unless Trump wins.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, Trump has folded more businesses than he successfully run. So no, that's the joke. It's
Well,
like,
but like
no, I'm trying to
every,
be the first guy to say we should refinance the debt. Just cancel it.
for his defense, like any good
Entrepreneur. Yeah, okay. So most businesses don't succeed. That's the reality. So if you borrow money, pay it back. In our case, we're going to talk a little bit about Ribbit, about borrowing with interest, lending people money, different forms of interest. We have, in general, not to take advantage of people who owe you money. So lo tieh lo kenoshe. If I know that Yohan owes me $100, so I don't have to text him every 5 minutes in order to ask him where's my money, where's my money, where's my money. What I can take in terms of collateral. So if I want to guarantee the money's going to be repaid, if he's poor, I can't take his only jlaba, I can't take your only tunic or your only blanket because you sleep in it at night. You have to be careful about not oppressing poor people, girim in particular. Lending money to a gir might be an extra mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to give tzedakah. There's a mitzvah to lend money too. Just because I need the money back doesn't mean I didn't do any good with it. I didn't, perform a mitzvah. And sometimes we hold that it's not even lending the money or even giving the money away. We hold the highest level of tzedakah as giving somebody a job. So here I didn't give him money, I gave him dignity. Maybe that's worth something. Not anymore. Not in socialist democracies. But there used to be such a concept as human dignity. So, and philanthropy for that matter. Non-taxational philanthropy. So we have quite a bit of mitzvot that pertain to what we can and what we can't do with our money. And the idea is that because this is something that we do on a daily basis, it's an opportunity to observe all these mitzvot. Now you are by default observing all these mitzvot unless you violate them. It's one of those happy situations, right? You're familiar with this? The Gemara has a discussion about what it means to be a tzaddik or a rasha. Rishon Bar Yochai, author of the Zohar HaKadosh, says that, this is the Gemara, even if you stay at home and do nothing all day long, I call you a tzaddik. And so one of the explanations to this, Avigal is angry. Okay, we matter Rishon Bar Yochai. So how many mitzvot aseh are there in the Torah?
248.
Right, Ramah. So 248. How many mitzvot lo ta'aseh are there in the Torah? 365. Okay, so we're at a ratio of approximately 3 to 2. Okay, 360 to 240 would be exactly 3 to 2. So the Rishon Bar Yochai is telling you, listen, you want to become observant? Let's make life really easy. Don't do anything. Nothing. No avodah zarah, no sleeping with your sister, no eating blood, no chelev, don't eat maaser while you're impure. Don't do anything. Okay? You already have 60% of the Torah in your pocket. It's easy. Now you're a tzaddik. Why are you a tzaddik? Because you're observing more than half of the Torah. This is very deep, by the way. It's profound. If you think about it, most of the things that we do wrong probably are getting up and doing the wrong thing.
But the negative ones, there's not like a lot about kohanim and stuff like this.
The negative mitzvot.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't observe the mitzvah of being a kohen and not contaminating Beit HaMikdash with my impurity. If I'm a zav, I'm a tzorah, if I touch the dead body, etc. I can learn about it. That's as close as I can come. Correct. And also I'm not a woman, so I can't go to the mikveh. Fine.
You're not really doing
I concede.
65.
Okay, Avigail wants a discount. 55% of mitzvot of the Torah. Actually, if I don't have animals, all the mitzvot of Rishit Hagez, Matnot Kehuna, Ma'asar Behema, I can't do. If I don't have agriculture, a lot of it's not. But I'm not violating the negative commandment of not doing these things. In other words, Rishit Hagez, for example, if I have an animal, before I shear it, I have to give some of the wool to the kohen. But I didn't violate the mitzvah of eating maaser while I'm in a state of impurity or contaminating the maaser for someone else. I mean, let's call it, it's a small majority. But still, I'm trying to do a Chosh Baruch Hu's accounting in a positive way. I didn't do anything wrong because I didn't do anything. It's a very positive way of looking at it. And when it comes to positive mitzvot, so you can learn them. You can be taught how to do these things, how to navigate around them. This is really a peculiarity of the mitzvah of Ribbit. It doesn't necessarily apply to the rest of them, but I'm going to mention this anyway. When the Torah tells us not to lend someone money with interest, it creates an interesting, a number of interesting situations. Number one is that these mitzvot appear in the general category and in the context of mitzvot ben adam l'chavero, how not to take advantage of people in your business life, monetary transactions, etc. So I would be taking advantage of you. It would be wrong of me if you only have one blanket and I say, I'll lend you $5, but I want that blanket as collateral. Like, I'm going too far. Maybe we're assuming the one who's lending the money has lots of money. I don't know if that's true, but there are certain things that you can't go so far as to press someone up against the wall. What if I want to start a business? I'm looking for self-employment, so I happen not to be a socialist. I'm actually looking to make my own parnasa. I'm looking to support my own family. But if I have to work at minimum wage in order to get there, it'll take me forever. So I'm willing to borrow the money. I'll even pay you interest. It's worth it for me if my business succeeds. Most of the Rishonim hold that it's asur for me to borrow or to lend money with interest. In other words, that we're both engaging in a forbidden transaction if I do this. According to the Rambam, it's not perfectly clear, at least not midoraita, that it's asur to lend someone money with interest if he agrees to it. The question is why. So I agreed to it because I borrowed money from the mafia, and if I don't pay them back tomorrow with 20% interest, they're going to kill one of my kids. Maybe that's not what he's referring to, but there's no mitzvah to own a home. This is one of the classic examples that I use. I want to buy a house in Eretz Yisrael. How much does it cost? $2 million for a small apartment of like 50 square meters. Why? Because everybody loves Eretz Yisrael. Is there a mitzvah to actually own a home? Is it okay if I just pay rent for the rest of my life? I want to advantage myself. I want to, advance my financial situation. I'd like to own equity. I want an asset. Okay, so today, if you know anyone who owns an apartment in Israel, they probably borrowed the money from some bank and paid somebody interest. And if it's an Israeli bank, it becomes an issue because how could they be lending with interest? So we'll talk about that next week. It's not totally clear, according to the Rambam, that it's asur to borrow money with interest, unless you have no alternative and you're being taken advantage of. So borrowing money from the mafia at 20% or 30% because I have nowhere else to go and there's another way I can do this, maybe that is asur, and maybe it's because you're being taken advantage of, and that's specifically what I was trying to avoid. But there's no mitzvah necessarily for me to open a business, or to buy a farm, or a vineyard, or to start producing cheeses. So here, it's not that I'm being taken advantage of. On the contrary, I'm looking for, I'd like to advance my financial cause, make a better living. I'd like to assume some risk, but I anticipate some kind of return. So it's not perfectly clear that's what the Torah intends to forbid. Okay? We're going to start with what's much more clearly forbidden in terms of the interdictions that apply to taking advantage of people when it comes to money. The assumption is going to be that it's asur to do this. That if you borrow something, you pay back exactly what you borrowed, not more, not less. Okay? Next week we'll talk about what might qualify as exceptions or exemptions from this. So there happens to be an entire siman. This is 161 in Torah Yoreh De'ah, that describes in one group all these interdictions of neshech, ribbit, and how you would be in violation of these interdictions if you were to lend someone something and expect something else back or something more in return than the principal. So the long story short, as the Torah says, basically everything is forbidden to lend with the expectation that you get more back. So if I lend you $1 and expect back $1.07, I'm guilty of lending you with interest. If I lend you a case of wine because you sell wine for a living and you need to sell it, and when you get the money back, you're going to pay me back the case of wine plus one bottle, right? This would be not neshech kesef, it would be neshech ochel. It's also forbidden by the Torah. So asur midoraita. So it's not just money; it's a monetary equivalent.
Like between Jews or between like...
This I meant to discuss in 2 weeks. These halachot begin on the siman kuf nun tet in the Torah. What's that?
We grew up in Italy.
So the reform of the Reformation needs reform.
You don't lend to Jews, but not Jews.
Right. No. Well, the reality is the Vatican for many years. This is the
that was all the Jewish profession
Yeah.
to do.
Exactly. It was the bitter irony in all of this was that the only job that the church allowed the Jews to work in was lending money. Why? Because sometimes they had a 7th or 8th mitzvah, which is don't lend Christians money with interest, but the Jews could. And the problem is there's a market. And we were aware of this long before them. But if you don't lend with interest, then no one's going to lend because I have no interest in that's why we call it interest, right? I have no interest in lending you the money because I'd rather just keep it. You need tzedakah, I'll give you some. You want $1 million to go buy a building, that's something else. So they needed the Jews, but they hated them. So they made them money lenders, and the Jews were able to at least make a living, in some cases a good living, because it was the only job that they wanted us to do, and they felt was a surah for them to do. By the way, in Islam too, I don't know if you're aware of this.
What is it called?
Islam has interdictions against lending with interest, and
Well,
insurances of all kind, or like
all the banks have like a Sharia law products, you know, like adapted to the Sharia law, like the Muslim law.
where they have this.
In most of the banks, I heard that.
Oh yeah, in the
many
banks,
times.
right? I didn't hear the first. Yeah, so the banks in insurance, mortgages. There's all kinds of. I don't know exactly how they get it. I should look this up. I don't know how they work around it. But it's a sur.
I think there is stuff to work around. They
What's
actually do, but it's more complicated than it looks.
Not so familiar with it. But the word of ribbit in Hebrew comes from ribui, like rav, harbe, which means a lot. And rabbi in Arabic also is like someone who's greater than you, or the verb to grow. Yeah. Rab in Arabic is like the shorish of like gadal in Hebrew. Ravya in Arabic is a child. Anyway, so we hold effectively that it's a surah to borrow, to lend anything and to expect to get back more than this in return. Doesn't matter if it's food or if it's money. Doesn't matter if you're giving the equivalent of something and expect to receive it back. This is because we're complicated in commodities. Right? What happens if I lend you $100 worth of wheat, and you tell me that you want to pay me back in money and not in wheat? Or for that matter, you want to pay me back in wheat, but the price has changed in the meantime. So the majority response is whatever I gave you is what you should give me back. Rabbi Eliyahu held this way. So if I gave you dollars today, and the dollar is worth 1.05 euro, I don't know, it's almost nothing. It used to be there was a difference.
09.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Today. 1.09 today. So the Deutsche Mark, I should say. So I lend you $1 today, and in 2 months the dollar is worth more or it's worth less. In theory, you could also say this is a kind of ribbit. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't my fault. The value of the money changed over the course of a certain period of time. But it's assumed that I'm not doing this for the purpose of taking advantage of anyone. Here I would say, look, if I lent you $1, give me back $1. I lent you 100, give me back 100. If the dollars became more or less valuable, we're both muhalim. We both basically forgive each other. We let the difference slide. You know where there's an explicit reference to this, by the way? Did you ever serve as a witness at a wedding? No. So you have the ketubah. So Sephardim, our ketubah, the Ashkenazim break it down to the ketubah itself, and they have the tanaim, what they call the terms and conditions. It's a little bit more off to the side on a table with a lot of alcohol. They make these side deals. So there are no side deals for the ketubah. It all appears in one big document. The witnesses sign it. Everybody's eyes are on the document. And the way many of the Sephardic ketubot still read today is that the Hatan, let's assume Manuel for argument's sake, he owes his wife, it's her first marriage, so he gives her 200 zuz, which is 200 silver coins. Whatever tosefet you want to add on top of that, you're welcome to. And very often we'll refer to 200 zuz, yafim v'tovim, that they are nice and they are proper coins, not shachukim, not damaged or worn out. It used to be these coins are worth what they actually weighed, which is why they refer to them as shekel in Hebrew, like mishkal, peso, what they call the money in Spain, Mexico. It's a weight, literally mishkal, dram in Arabic means the same thing. So what they would do is they would say that these are not only standard coins, but the coins themselves should be in good condition. They should weigh what they're supposed to weigh. They should be nice and shiny. You shouldn't be giving your cheap coins that weigh a little bit less. And she'im pihatu lo v'im hotiru. If the value of the coins, if silver itself as a commodity becomes less valuable, then then what he promises her in terms of silver is basically this: I promised you 200 or 300 whatever silver coins. If the value of the silver goes up, you benefit. If the value of the silver goes down, you lose. Meaning why? Because they're right now in my possession. I'm not obligated to pay you until the time that actually becomes necessary. And at that time, I agree to pay you a certain number of silver pieces. If I want to pay you in gold, I have a problem. It might not be a sur, it might be the only way that I can pay you. If that's the currency changed. If the king died, or if there was a rebellion or a revolution. But at the end of the day, I have to pay you either what I promised you, or the equivalent in some other currency. They'll usually go back and say, well, we were married for 20 years, I'm going to pay you in gold what the silver was worth 20 years ago when we first got married. But it gets pretty complicated. The general rule is that we try to pay back whatever it was that you received, even if there was some kind of a difference. Because it's not clear the price of wheat is going up or going down, I can lend you wheat, you can pay me back in wheat. We assume that's the case. Anyhow, even though it says neshech kesef and neshech ochel, that's the expression in the Torah in Parshat in Chumash Devarim, Parshat Shoftim. We come to include any kind of neshech anywhere, so it doesn't matter. Even if wood is not edible, if I lent you wood and I expect to get it back, it's exactly what I'm supposed to receive. And now we begin with the exceptions. So Ri already is discussing the concept of land. So if I lent you land, or if I gave you like a temporary loan, or a temporary, really it would be like a feudal system. So let's say you're looking for work, and I'll say, fine, I'll let you use this 5 acres of my vineyard, or 5 acres of my wheat field, in order to produce. The value of the land, or what it is that I lent you, already saying you can't really compare. How the land is evaluated depends on how productive it is. And if the land's going to be more productive one year and less the next year, maybe it rained more in your year than it did in mine, this already depends on things that are out of your control. So we're not adamant about exactly what I gave you is what I'm going to get back. If I give you something that had a particular value at that time, that's all I expected back. And if it's the nature of a commodity that changes a lot, then we don't necessarily expect that I should have to compensate you for the difference in the value. But the long story short is that we're very careful about this. We try to keep it as simple as possible. I think we'll put a bookmark in here. I wanted to discuss next week the circumstances, situations in which we permit, for business purposes, to lend with interest. That's the bottom line, is that today it is done. If it weren't for this, there would be no private ownership of homes in Eretz Yisrael, for example.
There would be no economy. How do you build economy?
Effectively right. There would be little to no economy. It kind of reminds me of the discussion we had by the Shemitah, Heter Mechira, that if we didn't allow the Jews to sell the land to the Arabs for the year, there would be no Jewish agriculture, and that would also be, we would depend on them for food. It would be terrible.
I wouldn't have a jobs.
Sorry?
I wouldn't have a jobs. We have a telescope.
Right. Yeah. Oh, he did it, Michael. Could you even get a copy of this? You think you could?
Yeah, I can. I'm sure.
Yeah, ask him if he can get us a PDF. I'd be happy, just because it's applicable directly to you.
For the
I can get one off the internet from the Beit Din of America, the YU's
I can
Beit
get
Din.
the one he got. I'm sure he has a copy, and maybe I will.
He must have kept. I'm sure he has a PDF somewhere on file of it.
Okay, I'll ask him to.
But just because it's a practical example of something that actually works. So I'm glad. First of all, I'm proud of him for actually doing it. It's nice that he cared enough to get it done. A lot of the other guys work for banks that's the other thing. Who are the stockholders in the bank, or who are the partners? Who actually controls? If the majority of the owners are Jewish, they should really be doing a Heter Iska. That's the way it's supposed to be. But in Israel, I think all the banks did one at their inception from the time that it was there. But it's pretty interesting, because effectively, according to everyone but the Rambam, this is an example of a rabbinic leniency that undoes a mitzvah midoraita. Because the world can't live without this, we're just on such a level that we need for this to happen. So they give
like
you permission to do it.
Or close.
Effectively, there would be no economy without this. We wouldn't own any of the houses that we currently have in Israel, and the economy depends very heavily on it. It's not a perfect system. Banks collapse too. It's a speculation at the end of the day. When anything depends on interest and appreciation, it always has a certain speculation associated with it. The famous example is Greece. Everybody got all upset when Greece decided defaulting on a portion of their debt. The world economy shook. The debt scenario has two possible outcomes. Everybody says, no, I get the money back and I have the interest, I'm going to spend the interest, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to buy a car. But you know you might not get the money back. That's why you take interest for lending it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
They will
Hopefully you
never
don't.
repay.
Uh-huh.
They will never repay.
Greece?
Yeah.
Bahayim lo.
They,
Good luck. There was an article in The Economist, I think, that said the only way that Greece could actually extricate themselves from this situation with a little bit of dignity would be if they started selling islands to the Chinese.
but they did it.
There was
They
a
did
plan
it.
for 2 islands. I don't know, that actually happened.
They, I don't know how many islands they sold, but
Right.
I'm sure that like they wanted to sell some island because
So they're not Greek properties anymore. They're Chinese soil.
I think
It's-
it's a
it's-
sort of usufruct that
you
No.
you give to them, and then I mean the ownership is still Greece, but it's like the Chinese can benefit from it. It's like they never. It's like the properties in Israel. Like Israel owns the land, and you don't
Yeah.
really buy a property. You buy like the right to use it for 90 years or whatever.
Right.
Which is effective. It's like buying it, but
Right. But it's the way the government can still maintain control over it if they want to for whatever
I
reason.
guess,
but-
yeah.
and make up some money
Huh?
and make some money.
That makes sense, 'cause the government, what's the government for if not revenue, right? It's the ultimate for-profit organization.